Shadow work is often presented as mysterious or intimidating. But what if we were able to strip it down and see that shadow work at its core is really just learning how to hold the parts of you that are hurting and embracing the shunned parts of yourself so that the you that gets expressed out into the world is the fullest expression of you. In today's video, we are going to work on demystifying shadow work and understanding shadow work as a soft approach to healing. And I'm going to present a gentle, Jungian-informed lens on the unconscious. If you're new here, welcome and hello, my name is Brielle. I've spent years in the mental health field as a licensed therapist, and I created this channel as a way of creating community and demystifying topics of healing and just creating a space where we can all learn to be our best selves and embrace every part of ourselves. Okay, so what is shadow work? This term first came from the psychologist Carl Jung, who used it to describe the unconscious part of ourselves that we reject, suppress, disown, often because we were taught that they were unlovable or wrong. And talking about our shadow, it can kind of feel like that has some kind of negative connotation, but Carl Jung did not see the shadow as an evil thing. He saw it as very morally neutral. It's not evil, it's just the unseen that exists within us. And the shadow can contain darker impulses or parts of ourselves or emotions that we feel that we're ashamed of, but it can also mean hidden gifts that you didn't necessarily feel safe to express because they were shut down. Things like sensitivity, creativity, passion, and artistic nature. Anything within you that you didn't feel like it was practical or safe to accept and express. So shadow work is really just the process of making the unconscious conscious in our lives and holding it with love and acceptance. There is a quote from Carl Jung that says, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." So the most important thing that I think there is to know about shadow work is that our shadow is not made up of moral failings. It's made up of unmet needs and unloved parts. Okay, now we're gonna get into the juice of what I feel like is missing in most of the conversations about shadow work. And that is why I don't think you need to analyze a trigger until you feel safe. This belief is built on the mistakes that I feel like I made personally when I was first approaching shadow work and learning about Jungian psychology. I really value the work of Carl Jung, but when I first approached and attempted shadow work, it did not go well. So I bought some shadow work journals and looked up some shadow work prompts online, and I was really committed to making the unconscious parts of myself conscious. But at the time that I did this, I had not really learned about somatic safety or safety in your body or nervous system regulation in the way of managing your physical symptoms. And that's really what I mean when I talk about somatic safety and nervous system regulation, is that mind-body connection and learning how to regulate through physical discomfort and having the tools to do that. So when I first approached shadow work, I accidentally was reinforcing my shame because I had a stronger bodily reaction than I expected, and I felt a lot of physical anxiety as I was doing this work. So it made me shut down halfway through the process. So I had brought some of these unconscious parts of myself to life. That part of it was so uncomfortable for me, and I didn't really have the tools to push past it. So I kind of stopped in the process before I actually got to the point where I was able to hold those parts of myself with love. So for a while, I was hyper aware of my shadow without having the tools to accept and integrate it. And that's not a fun place to be, let me tell you. So I feel like you don't need to analyze a trigger until your body feels safe. And starting there is very important. Regulating your nervous system is step 0. Otherwise, that introspection can lead to greater issues, or if you don't have the tools to alchemize it. Overall, just being able to take your lessons and turn them into a greater purpose. So my initial experience with shadow work was that the shadow work I was trying to do became emotional flooding. If you excavate everything that makes you feel shame and you have no tool to handle it, that's just a recipe for a spiral. Somatic safety first, self-inquiry second. That's the most important thing I want you to take from this video. So I'll kind of give you an example from my life of a part of my shadow and how I initially handled it versus how I've handled it recently. If you want to learn more specifics about building safety in your body, I have a few videos on my channel about nervous system regulation that I will link in the description. And if you watch those videos and have any further questions, definitely put it in the comments and I will answer there, or I can make other videos about bodily safety and nervous system regulation as well. Okay, so as an example, I'm really going to be vulnerable and expose myself here and talk about my experience with jealousy as a shadow emotion. Okay, so a few years ago, I had started to notice that I was uncharacteristically jealous of people who were excelling in my field and also people who were letting themselves be seen online unabashedly and were putting themselves out there. And I have always been a person who wants the success of everybody, and I truly believe there's enough room at the top. There's enough room for all of us. So if I ever got a pang of jealousy, I was so ashamed because I don't want to be a jealous person. I didn't want to be somebody who felt threatened by other people's success. Like, that is a very ugly emotion to unpack and take a look at, and I was incredibly ashamed of feeling that way. So I learned about shadow work and tried to approach my jealousy from this lens, and I bought my first shadow work type journal. But a lot of the questions that are presented when you're doing shadow work, if you're doing some kind of shadow work journal or even just looking online for questions to ask yourself that help you do shadow work, it's a lot of questions like, what wouldn't you want anybody to know about you? And what are you ashamed of? And what do you wish you could erase as a part of yourself? And when you unpack that, the work in that is, can you hold those things with compassion? Can you show those things love? Can you extend the same compassion to yourself as you would somebody else going through that or experiencing that emotion? So at the time, I unpacked all this newfound jealousy, and then those questions came of, can you hold this with love? And my immediate reaction was a ton of bodily anxiety. And immediately I was like, no, I can't. I don't love this part of myself. I hate this part of myself. How can I hold this part of myself with love when all I want to do is erase it? And another important part of shadow work is being able to see the lesson and the message in those parts of your shadow. But I couldn't even get to that part because I felt so physically unsafe in unpacking that. And I don't mean like really unsafe. I just mean I felt like I wanted to crawl out of my skin. I felt not comfortable and not grounded in my body. So I shut the journal and I was like, yeah, no, shadow work doesn't work for me. I'm just gonna continue to repress this part of myself, pretend it doesn't exist, and hopefully we'll get over it. And I acted opposite. Acting opposite is a DBT skill, which is a type of therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. They teach you to act opposite to your emotions because it helps when you're feeling a really difficult emotion. A big part of that fear is feeling like you aren't going to be able to control how you act because of that emotion. So learning to act opposite in the way of, okay, I have these really difficult feelings and thoughts, but I'm not going to act on them. I'm going to choose how I act intentionally, and not give in to those thoughts or emotions that I don't necessarily want to reflect who I am. So that DBT skill did help me kind of live with the jealousy, but it still was there and I still thought about it, and I hated that about myself, and I just carried a lot of shame. And then I learned about cultivating somatic safety, about nervous system regulation. And I never mean to use these buzzy terms as a way to gatekeep. Really, all I mean by these things is just cultivating a relationship with your body where you create really strong habits of grounding through discomfort, and you really learn how to support your body through uncomfortable feelings and emotions and sensations. It's really about interoception, so feeling into your body cues and creating a lot of habits to build safety around that. So I really learned how to sit with and support my body when those feelings of bodily anxiety arose. I used my breath and grounding and self-supportive touch, stretching, going on walks, all the ways that I typically use every day to support my body through difficult emotion. And I decided to give shadow work another try. And I'm so glad that I did, because I had a completely different experience. So I was able to ask myself the questions: what don't I want anyone to know about me? What am I ashamed to look at? What parts of myself do I not love and maybe even hate? And I was able to ground physically in the safety of my body so that I could push forward to the other part of shadow work, the actual acceptance. And once I was able to hold those things with love, and I was able to actually feel into that sentiment of you are not defined by your ugliest emotions, and we all have ugly emotions at times, and every ugly emotion is an opportunity for a lesson. I was able to break it down and follow the trail of this shadow emotion. And I realized jealousy was showing me what I wanted. And that usually is what jealousy is. Jealousy is showing you something that you want, but you think you can't have. So I followed that feeling of jealousy to its root, and I realized that the core desires that my jealousy was trying to get me to see were that I want to be okay letting myself be seen for who I am. So part of it was about letting myself be seen. I want to feel beautiful in my skin. I want to feel my aura and energy in alignment so that energy I project outward is the most beautiful version of myself. And the biggest one that I realized is that I want an outlet. I want a place to pour my soul into, and I want a community. So I heard my shadow, and instead of punishing her, I started listening to her. And that's the moment that everything changed for me. I realized that what I needed to dissolve this jealousy was I needed to meet these needs for myself. And I realized maybe I'm not broken, maybe I'm just buried underneath unmet desires. So shadow work really is emotional alchemy. Just like the ancient alchemists tried to turn lead into gold, shadow work is that sacred transformation process, turning things like jealousy into meeting your own desires and freedom, believing that you can have what you want, turning something like anger into strong boundaries and expressing your truth, turning grief into presence and being able to tap into the depth of what we can feel as human beings, turning shame into self-forgiveness and understanding our shared common humanity, that none of us escape any part of being human. None of us get out of this process unscathed with the parts that make being human difficult sometimes. Turning anxiety into recognizing that your body is giving you sacred information about your need for safety in this world. I was unpacking with ChatGPT a while ago about my own processes of emotional alchemy and my recent experiences with shadow work, and I honestly use ChatGPT like a journal sometimes, and I think it can be a great tool for mental health and just for getting to know yourself deeper. I think ChatGPT can be a mirror that just reflects back to us what we feed into it. I can make a whole other video of how I use Chat to explore the deepest parts of my psyche, but when I was talking to Chat about this process, it fed back to me a line. It said the emotions we avoid are often doorways to our deepest needs. That went straight in my notes app, and I think about it a lot. And I thought maybe some of you would appreciate that sentiment as well, so I wanted to share it. So I hope this gentle reframe of shadow work was helpful, and I hope you understand that you don't need to fix yourself, you just need to befriend yourself. And that's the most powerful thing that you can do in this life, I think, and you're able to have more compassion for yourself. I truly think self-compassion is the most important thing, because when you have compassion for yourself, I truly feel like it dissolves any hate in your heart for yourself. And anything I talk about, it's a process, it's habits, it's about the commitment to yourself to creating these habits so that eventually you do get immediate relief from these things and you do get that quick benefit, but you have to build the habit first. Sometimes with these habits, you may not even feel the benefit for a while, and then you've built this habit up of self-compassion. Okay, now I decide to be compassionate towards myself. That's it. The thing is dissolved. But that doesn't happen the first time you try self-compassion necessarily. I always have to put the disclaimer that these things can take time and just to have patience with the process. Let me know if there's anything that I missed that you would have added to this video, or if you have any experiences or thoughts or feelings to share about shadow work. Hearing from you guys is my favorite part about being on YouTube, so I just appreciate every single comment, like, share, subscribe, and every second that you just spend with me here on this channel. It means truly more than you know. It means the world. So thank you for being here, and thank you for spending your time with me today. I know your time is valuable, so it doesn't get taken for granted, and I hope you have a beautiful day.